Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining TreeSisters this evening for our event discussing the spirit of the rainforest. And we have the author, Rosa, here with us tonight. We are going to just give a couple of moments for more people to sign on. We have almost 300 people signed up to attend tonight, so we are very excited. A few housekeeping rules for Zoom. We will keep the chat on. If you have any questions that you'd like Rosa to answer for you, you can pop them into the Q&A function on your Zoom screen at the bottom. You should see a panel that has Q&A on it. You can pop your question in there, and hopefully at the end of the webinar tonight, we'll have time to answer some of those questions. As you sign on, please take a few moments, pop your name if you feel comfortable or where you're dialing in from tonight in the chat function. We'd love to hear where people are calling from. If you need any sort of translation for the call, the function for that is on Zoom as well. The session tonight will be recorded. However, the chat function should not be part of that. So we'll give everybody just a moment to do that. And again, welcome. Thank you for spending your Thursday evening with us or Thursday afternoon, wherever you are calling in from. We are incredibly excited to have you here today. If you are new to TreeSisters, we are a vibrant, living movement where environmental action meets deep nature connection and gender equity. We fund ethical, community-rooted planting projects that take bold climate action, uplift women, and honor the leadership of local and indigenous communities in restoring their lands. TreeSisters champions the rights of nature, and we are a growing global shift, restoring our bond with the earth and remembering what it means to live in relationship with the natural world. To date, TreeSisters has worked in 19 countries with 19 restoration partners. We've planted almost 30 million trees and restored almost 11,000 hectares of tropical forest through our amazing planting projects who work endlessly to restore those forests. My name is Ashley. I'm the head of engagement and impact for TreeSisters. I am so incredibly excited to introduce everybody to Rosa here tonight. Rosa grew up in the Amazon forest as her backyard, learning its lessons from her grandmother, a native healer skilled in natural medicine, and she went on to earn a PhD in the US. She's a Peruvian chemical biologist, a National Geographic explorer, United Nations Harmony with Nature scientist, BBC Top 100 Women award-winning artist, and I think as of today, Forbes Peru
Yeah.
Top 50 Women in Peru. I mean, that was just about an hour ago that I happened to see that pop up. So we are so incredibly happy to have her here today. And if you haven't had a chance to read the book, it is for sale online. It is absolutely stunning. The artwork in itself is gorgeous, but it's a fantastic book. And we are going to spend some time this evening asking Rosa to tell us about her adventures in the Amazon, the indigenous wisdom, and what we all can do to help conserve the beautiful world around us. So again, Rosa, welcome. And a big congratulations on the release of Spirit of the Rainforest. I wanted to kick off the session today by asking if there was anything, a specific story or discovery or something that you really wanted to share with everybody to introduce them to you and all of your adventures as a scientist.
Thank you so much for having me, Ashley, and to TreeSisters for the invite. This is so exciting. I appreciate and admire the work you guys are doing and supporting worldwide. So it's really great to get to chat, my first virtual chat actually about the book out there live with people. So thank you for having me. I think really the book exposes such deep work that we've been having in the Amazon rainforest for the last few years, from work with boiling rivers to stingless bees, more recent with other different kind of animals and mammals. I would say something that happened since the book came out, so it was not included, but I think you kind of see the progression of like the behind the scenes within one of the chapters of the book is that our science led to a new law in Peru that for the first time protects stingless bees and approved only a few months ago. And as a continuation to that, we are leading the first World Rights of Nature Declaration for stingless bees and their ecosystem as a model. We're hoping that that can then scale to indigenous knowledge itself and other species and for other groups that are working and doing fantastic science too. So yeah, I'm just happy to dive into the biodiversity, the science, but also I think the kind of ancestral wisdom that I make sure to honor and to include from my ancestry and from the teachers I continue to learn throughout the book. And that aspect, I think, of spirituality that has been removed in a way from any scientific talk for so long that I'm hoping this book can kind of just at least open up the conversation to talk about these topics on the same level.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I have a whole slew of questions that I am really excited to ask you about tonight. But you just picked up one that I was going to ask you about later on, but I'm going to go ahead and jump into it now. For anyone who is calling in from the UK tonight, it is a really piece of work through policy, through legislation, through NGOs, through Tree Sisters as well. We're really starting to talk about the rights of nature. And I just wanted to ask how your experience in the rainforest helped you feel that rights of nature was something that we should really champion, and how you want to explain rights of nature to anyone dialing in today.
So for anyone who's not familiarized with rights of nature, I'll give you the more kind of out there definition, and then I'll explain how it aligns with us and where how we came to it. So the rights of nature is a movement that aims to assign and recognize personhood to nature, the same way that companies and entities have personhood in courts and can be defended as such, just as human beings can by virtue of being alive. Then it aims at giving nature natural entities, whether that is a river or a mountain or an animal, a species, that same personhood as well to give a much stronger and comprehensive layer of protection that it hasn't have until now. To me, rights of nature is just a modernized title for something that indigenous communities have felt, lived, and experienced since the beginning of time. For indigenous communities, definitely in the Amazon as well as in the Andes, where I have roots from, but also around the world that I've got to connect with, from the people in Alaska to China to places even within Europe, you do find a commonality amongst these traditional worldviews, indigenous cosmovisions, which is that nature is alive and that natural beings have a spirit as well. And there are many beautiful stories of creation that I'll be happy to get into as to how that happens. And each is really beautiful and unique on its own. But the ultimate idea is that nature is alive. And as such, I respect it the same way I'm respecting an uncle or a grandmother or a friend. And even taking resources from it, it is also a regenerative and process of reciprocity, where if I am taking something, I am also giving it back so that those coming after have enough. And so it is, to me, now, rights of nature as a movement, just an extension of indigenous worldviews that now are having more spotlights in the world. And I do really believe they have the potential to be the transformation key. We need to regenerate our planet. And we're seeing beautiful examples, mostly in rivers around the world, with even an example here in the UK just kind of coming to fruition after so long, one in Peru that became really key in our country. But a few others popping up around the world, like the work of Cali Valentur with the leatherback turtle in Panama, and well, us now working on the first rights of nature for stingless bees.
Great. Thank you. There's a whole great section in the book about rights of nature. And I'll mention a rights of nature event that True Sisters will be putting on with Rose in a couple weeks' time at the end, if anybody would like to hear a bit more about that. Um, Rosa, in the book, one of the things that I found to be really, really, really interesting was the book read as a personal experience A bit of an adventure story. There were a few sections in the book where I found myself with my mouth open, turning the page as if it were some sort of, Netflix drama, and I was going to stay up all night and binge it. There were a few sections I really couldn't put it down because the stories became so exciting. There's a lot of really interesting information about animals and plants, bits of things that I had to kind of look up on the side because I was just so fascinated. I wanted more information. And there was a lot in the book about your grandmother and about her, the natural pharmacies and from the Amazon and the wisdom that she passed on. Is there anything in the book related to your grandma or the things that she taught you that you still embrace in everyday life?
Thank you so much for putting it that way. The Netflix drama I loved because I think the adventure side is something that everyone can relate to. It's it draws something like a wild side of every human being, the aspect of fear and courage and even teamwork and resilience and just all of those feelings that emerge. I think it's such a sensorial way to get to experience nature. So it's definitely one of my favorite ways to also experience it, just seeing it through all those lenses. So I'm glad that that came through. And yeah, my grandma is definitely the common thread. um I grew up learning from her every single day. Whenever I was not school, I was being cared for by my grandmother because my parents were working, and she is an Andean healer still alive today, who was also inspired by her own grandmother, who was an Amazonian healer, and who we didn't really know much about until the last few years. Trying to track down a bit more of our lineage and story, we learned that she was a semi-nomad community member in the central Amazon. And my grandmother just instilled on me, really by example of her doing every day, and her own inherent like relationship and communication with nature, how to be just with nature through our, now that I learned, through our indigenous lens, which to me was just how we grew up. And I grew up in the city. I spent extensive times in the Andes and the Amazon visiting our family members, but I was in the city to attend school, and it was a modern city like any other big city in the world, but just having that deep rooted core with my grandmother, and seeing her kiss plants and flowers and talking to the roots before she would harvest them to make different medicinal cocktails, and just hearing how, in her words, quote unquote, every plant is medicine from the smallest to the largest, really is what planted the first seed in my head as to, wait a second, nature isn't it just nice, and it's not just beautiful and smells good, it's also, is it also giving us medicine? This is me as a child, right, just being fascinated, thinking that I had discovered this new thing I didn't know, that nature was almost like a doctor, and I just became so fascinated, and it has been like a curiosity that, I mean, just continues to grow to this day.
It's amazing. I love that idea that nature is like a doctor. I mean, there's so much more research coming out about things like forest bathing and grounding and things that we can do that are obviously much further away than leaning on the medicinal plants of the Amazon. But nature is a doctor in its own way, and that's a really beautiful way to put it. Um, Learning from your grandmother and learning from growing up where you did, how do you now, as a scientist, probably often based in the very Western world, how do you navigate that space between the indigenous knowledge systems and the Western science? And as part of that, what do you wish that more scientists knew and understood about that relationship? I mean, I can certainly reflect that even growing up in the States, none of my studies in my bachelor's or my master's degree taught me anything about Indigenous wisdom, despite being around plenty of Indigenous people. It wasn't part of our scientific study. So, how do you bridge the two, and how do you wish more scientists embrace that?
Yeah, that's an important point, and it's still not, right? It's still not part indigenous ways of thinking, or even just learning it as a perspective. It's not included in most curricula or programs worldwide. Slowly, we're seeing a few come up, but rare. I didn't really learn that there was the distinction that exists until I left Peru, as naive as that may sound. And I was 18 when I moved to the United States to pursue a dual degree in biochemistry and molecular biology, with the 100% naivety of someone who knew really no scientist was ever in my family before. I was the first one speaking English, never lived or traveled abroad. And it was through my entire training as a scientist, which was a very long time between undergrad and postdoctorate and postdoctoral training as well, that I learned of that separation that you're talking about, that there was really no space within the ways in which we teach scientific methodology and analysis and data collection that allowed for indigenous perspectives to be included. So I understand that distinction and separation really has come since the enlightenment times, when even medicine started to treat the body as a machine, even literally mapping the pathways of where blood is traveling, the same way that you have cables connecting tires within a car. And it is that type of oversimplification of our human body that I think eventually did propel the way in which medicine, modern science developed, by not allowing these ancestral ways of thinking and spiritualism to have any space at all. And I think it was an experience that I had at the end of my undergrad, where this was really wild, but I managed to land an internship in a Chinese traditional medicine hospital in Beijing. I had never been to Asia before, and yet here I was packing my luggage and, just diving into the experience, speaking no word of Chinese either, but having an incredible, intense summer experience where I was in a hospital that had both knowledge systems. They had the Western medicine, surgery, pharmacies with pills, and it also had a traditional medicine wing that was elevated to the same level, to the point that even the medical insurance national systems integrated and acknowledged traditional medicine. And it was such a common thing for patients to receive two recipes, one for Western medications and one for traditional medicines. I even got to visit the natural pharmacy that they had, and it made me think of Harry Potter with like those giant libraries and those stairs that kind of move around, because I remember seeing that. And they have thousands of little drawers with thousands of medicinal resources, from seeds to flowers and roots. And me just thinking, why have I never seen this in Peru before? Why is it that that traditional knowledge that my grandmother and many other people have held in Peru for so long, it's always been reserved to the farmer market or the gurus or the alternative people? And I think ever since, that's really what has just instill in me the idea, can we change that? And what I noticed from my humble and small corner as a scientist was, because there was no science on our traditional knowledge systems led by locals as well, then I thought maybe that is one of the reasons because of why this gap exists. And we are seeing now more representation of indigenous leaders worldwide. Not enough, but little by little more. We're having now figures that we can at least remember the name of. We see them speaking at COP in other platforms, but I still, not only is that not enough, or we don't have enough of them, but we also need them leading in the science. Because when we talk about actually changing policy and actually generating laws that will have the downstream effect of actually creating radical change, those are driven and based on data. And that data is most often than not driven from scientific articles that unfortunately have been reserved for a very small part of the population. And so, yeah, I think that's what really drives, and you can see that throughout the book, is just integrating these knowledge systems, but also us, with all the work we do with my organization, actually doing our best to integrate more indigenous people into leading this kind of work.
Yep. It's so you just said something there that really resonated. As I like to think of myself as a very science-based person, but I think it did occur to me when I was reading the book that science, as I have been taught it and what I studied, is quite two-dimensional. And in reading everything that you wrote, you realize that there is so much more to it when you think outside of kind of the norm of what you're taught in the classroom. So thank you for that. Um, Kind of as a carry on to that, so many of the places that you write about in the book, so many of the moments and experiences clearly have quite deep cultural but also ecological significance. And one of those that you write about that I really can't rave about enough about just how my mouth was open and I just couldn't read it quick enough is about the boiling river and that it is incredibly scientifically unique but also deeply sacred. So I was wondering for the audience tonight if you'd be willing to share a shorter synopsis of that story and what it meant to operate in a place that had such deep meaning, both ecologically but culturally as well.
Of course, the Boiling River, for those who have never heard about it, it is one of the most special places that I have ever been on our planet. It's located in the central Amazon. And by boiling river, I mean it literally. It is a large river of large volume, depth, and width that is constantly boiling. So when we talk about thermal rivers or springs around the world, we have several examples from Yellowstone to Iceland, Ethiopia, Italy, but they tend to be small in size and or tend to always be connected to a strong source of energy like a volcano, which makes sense. That is what gives them that heat to constantly boil. What is so unique about the boiling river is that to this date, it is the largest documented thermal river, so hot that if you're standing next to it, you will hear the bubbles popping and you can get basically stung by the water, and the vapor rising from it is so hot and intense that at some point, especially if it's a little darker in the day, I lose track as to where the clouds are because of that, how powerful the vapor rises. And of course, it gets your hair wet, it even can make you dizzy. So it is a space you need to be very careful on. It also gets quite slippery, so you need to be really careful how you navigate it because the water can reach up to 99 Celsius, 200 Fahrenheit. So that is your boiling temperature. People even cook eggs there. They used to cook chickens back in the day. Traditionally, they make tea with that water as well. Now, because it is so extreme, for a long time, it was believed that nothing could survive there because if a small mammal fell in it, it cooks immediately. And traditionally, by the local people, the river harbors really powerful spirits that keep it safe. What is also unique about this is, unlike other thermal springs in our planet, that flowers, plants, trees, and animals don't want to be near it because they get hurt, in the boiling river of the Peruvian Amazon, you find giant trees not minding that hot, intense, scorching vapor, and they're just growing and basically cohabiting with this boiling river. And anyways, we became the first group to study the only life form that can exist in this extreme place where nothing else can live, which are microbes, extreme forms of microbes that we knew nothing about, that can give us clues as to how the flora survives, acting almost like a natural laboratory for climate change. We gave them names after cultural spirits too, which is something I'm really proud of. And then throughout that, just by virtue of how dangerous the space is, I think so many unexpected dangers and adventures emerge, including one of our colleagues that unfortunately stepped into boiling mud ankles deep when we were deep into virgin jungle. And so yeah, I think one of the biggest lessons that I take out of all of that adventure is just the working at the pace of nature, but also just remembering our place when we are in the outdoors, which is, I think, such a beautiful lesson in humility that we all can learn from.
I really, really didn't love that story because obviously there was an injury involved, but it was such a beautiful story about respecting nature and being conscious about what is happening around us. Um, with that, you talk a lot in the book about living in harmony with nature, and there is a term there called good living that you see on occasion. Um, how do you see good living, living in harmony with nature, respecting nature as more than just a slogan, but how do you see doing that in practice? And maybe that's within scientific research. Maybe that's for people listening in today. Maybe it's for organizations, big ones, small ones. Maybe it's for communities. But often we do see it thrown around as a slogan. So how do we make sure that we act good on it and that it's more than just a slogan and it's practice?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I mean, there are many ways that people refer to it, of course, in different indigenous languages, but also one that I've heard of is living beautifully, which I think is so gorgeous. And I think it's multi-layer, many components. I think one of them is just the acceptance and the celebration that nature is alive, and the same way you would treat a family member, you treat nature. Of course, it is also the place where people get their food and shelter and resources to make their homes, as well as medicine. So there is a part of, local people going and taking some leaves or fruits or other resources, but by virtue of treating it like family, you ask for permission and you don't take more than what you need, and you make sure that you regenerate. And that is a component of good living, because you make sure, one, that you are also taking care of yourself and your family as a human being, as a society, but also you're taking care of the society that comes next, while also caring for the environment around you. Because for many of the indigenous people that I've directly worked with, they are well if nature is well, and if nature is bad, they will be bad as well. And so it is just an inherent intuition to do that. And if the plants are thriving and the rivers are clean, then they're also happy, and that comes from the aspect of them having, of course, access to clean water and access to the resources, but also because they see their family members alive. um, I will also say that when we try to, let's try to go now a little bit more into the scientific aspect. There is a wealth of data now that proves that by being in green spaces that are healthy, different parts of our brain get activated, even our immune system is strengthened, and there's actual chemical changes that are happening in our brain by us smelling the molecules that are released by microbes in the soils or by leaves in different trees, that we're basically in communication chemically to one way or another with the natural world around us. So I think that is the way that I say scientifically on that other explanation that I just gave. If you have a thriving natural system around you, then your own physical well-being, which then in turn is also your emotional well-being, will be good as well. And so I think if we base our practices around that, so if we are a company in the other side of the world and you think about good living, what does that mean? Then look first inwards within your own company, in your leadership, and your own community. Because if they are not well, then you as a habitat and your surroundings, that includes nature around you, won't be well. So you have to make sure they're good, but also in balance with the around. So what else can you do to regenerate as you go? What else can you do to regenerate not just biodiversity, but also culture?
Great. Thank you. And you did mention the increasing wealth of research showing that we really do our own health is improved the more time we spend outside, whether or not mentioned earlier, grounding or forest bathing or mindfulness or somehow really connecting to nature does actually improve our mental and our physical health. Um, let's see. Gosh, there's so much good stuff here. One of the other things I wanted to ask is you mentioned very briefly in the book, but I think it resonated with me not only from a personal point of view. In the book, you mentioned that you experienced some rejection, but that you kept pushing forward and essentially ignored those who may have presented you with rejection or didn't maybe believe in you and your work. And some of the work that Tree Sisters does, one of our really important pillars of who we are as an organization, is that we believe in supporting women and giving them the opportunities to be in leadership positions that they are allowed to and enabled to benefit their local communities and climate change and the environment all around us. So with that, what would you say to any young women or perhaps Indigenous girls who dream of becoming scientists or protectors of the land? How do you get past the difficult parts and how do you get past the rejection?
I would say with internet is a beautiful and fantastic thing, and it also can be a very deceiving thing. And by that, of course, I'm referring to social media. At least personally, I always try to share two sides because it is so easy to just see a curated version of someone's life and career, when in reality the no's are 100 times, if not thousands, sometimes more abundant than the yeses. And I think that is been my case, and I am certain the case of every human out there that just dares to try their best. And just to give you an example, when I had finished already my degrees, I already had scientific papers and a career in progress to showing that I was capable of doing work. I was a National Geographic explorer, had achieved a certain level within my career, and I thought doing the jump to leading my own organization wouldn't be so difficult, that I would be able to find my way within the first few months. And I had over 100 rejections for some of the first ideas that I was proposing now as an organization leader. And it did hurt because it lasted for so long. And it, of course, brings about so much doubt. And I think that happens at any stage, at the beginning, middle, towards the end of anyone's career. I don't think anyone has ever has it figured out, no matter how put together someone may seem, because we're in the end, we're human beings living in a constantly changing world, particularly now with how quickly digitalization and AI is progressing. We have no clue how things are going to look like. That is society, even careers in 5 and 10 years. And so I think from my perspective is just following my own curiosity has been, I think, my strength, even in the face of people telling me that I shouldn't be following one thing or the other because it didn't match the story, or because it didn't match what I should be doing, or what they thought was the recipe for success, or for where the limits of where I came from. And I don't know, perhaps I do give kudos to my parents to just allow me to be crazy as a child in terms of following things that I was passionate and curious for. That I just that would be my biggest suggestion and advice for anyone out there that is young and a little bit afraid of, can I do something meaningful, or can I find something that I'm passionate about that I can contribute to, or will I be laughed at, or will I face rejection? You will face the rejection, and perhaps people will criticize. That is not even, I think, in my experience, a question. It's just a question whether you stay authentic to yourself, because that is how you build a completely unique path and bring to the world the thing that only you can bring. Because I do fervently believe that every single human can bring something unique to the table by virtue of their own experiences and backgrounds and feelings and dreams as well.
Thank you. Again, another absolutely beautiful response. And bringing something unique to the table is it just flows perfectly to the question to give you space to talk about your research with the stingless bees. They are, they certainly aren't gosh, when I first started out in my career, someone described animals as being sexy or not. And I thought that was such a weird statement, but you get it in things like elephants, sharks, lions, tigers. These are those big, sexy animals that people, really know everything about and they really want to learn about and they want to go see. But stingless bees isn't necessarily on that list. So tell us about the research. Tell us about why it is important, why you chose them to study. Tell us everything.
I think I've always been fascinated by the things that are less obvious. And perhaps that comes from, I was very shy as a child, and I always thought, definitely when I moved to the US for the first time when I was 18, I was very shy speaking up because my English wasn't good and my accent was really heavy. And I think I've always gravitated to just the things that people are not noticing in one way or another. Of course, my love for microbes is part of that, or for questions that perhaps are just not obvious. And stingless bees, I was just reaching for this beautiful little guy. I don't know if you can see clearly, but it's a stingless bee art made by some of our local communities with natural tree fibers. And I have a photo that I'll show with everyone, that is in the book as well, which uh, was really a beautiful entry to our project. Hopefully you can see it there. So that photo was taken for National Geographic, and it's not so clear there, but I'm posing with hundreds of bees on my face. And it was inspired on a photo shoot that Angelina Jolie did for National Geographic with stinging bees. So kudos to her, because I wouldn't have dared to do that. But I was posing with stingless bees. And I think, one, by the fact that most people I had talked to had never heard about stingless bees and even knew that those existed, because we have never seen them on TV. We have never heard about them really on books that are not really specialized, so not the general public. And even people within Peru, many people didn't know that we have these, and these are native to our land. And one of the things that attracted me the most with stingless bees, one, the fact that they make honey that no other bee can make, just very unique medicinal honey that is used to treat from COVID-19 symptoms to infertility to eye cataract and a variety of wide range of diseases too, but also the relationship that people develop with them. The stingless beekeepers that I've met in the Amazon and the relationship they hold with stingless bees, to me, are almost like the most beautiful and colorful example of how we can aim for a relationship to nature be of this reciprocity balance, but also joyful. I think we talk so much about respecting and reciprocity, which we need to talk more of, but we also need to bring back the joy and the fun that is being in the outdoors and interacting with natural life in respectful ways. I'm not saying go and carry animals on your shoulders. In any way, we support that. But I think when we look at indigenous communities, there was this beautiful moment where I saw stingless bees that were acting very aggressive. And when they're aggressive, they cannot sting, so they bite and they fly really hard, almost as if they're hitting you with their buzzing wings and bodies. It can really hurt. And if it's a larger species, it will literally, rip skin apart and you will bleed. So they can be quite aggressive. And one hive was being really agitated. And when the beekeeper that cares for those bees came, within just a matter of 15-30 seconds, the bees calmed down and started to just fly and calmly and dance around. And the beekeeper was just took it as like, oh yeah, of course they know me. It was like my friends, just needed to see me and calm down. And I think there's just so much that we can learn there, that is just fascinated. And yeah, we've been the first group to conduct chemical analysis on stingless bee honey in Peru, which we didn't want to just leave in a scientific paper, but rather use it for capacity building, which led to the price of stingless bee honey in a small bottle go from $3 American to now $30 American, actually generating, a potential livelihood that also regenerates the Amazon. Our science was the basis to create a new law in Peru that, for the first time, assigns protection and promotion to the stingless bees. And well, it's now, of course, leading to our work with rights of nature. But chapter 4 in the book is all about them and a bit of scenes behind this National Geographic campaign that we did to bring awareness. Yeah.
It was a really interesting description, reading because Rosa goes into detail about the bees landing on your face and feeling the honey drip. And I think there's even a mention of, not really wanting it to mess the makeup that you have on for the photo shoot, because you always end up with makeup on for big photo shoots like this. But it was a really beautiful description, and I didn't quite catch that they can still bite. Obviously, anything with a mouth can bite, but I didn't catch that when you're describing them all over your face. So it's a different perception of it now for me. Um, you mentioned in that about, we talk a lot about reciprocity with nature and respecting nature, but I think you're right in that sometimes, especially organizations, miss the boat in talking about things like finding joy in nature, um, which is a little bit maybe more informal and a little bit more embracing your inner child. But Rosa, how do you then find joy in nature when you're not doing research, when you're not on an expedition, when you're not doing something with the purpose of bringing research back? How do you find that joy?
I'm glad you mentioned the aspect that that is something that a lot of companies and organizations are missing, because we need to talk more about it. If we look at the even neurological data on how fun and joy improves memory as well as attention span and even just our learning capacity, it goes exponentially to literally 400x. So when we are having fun, we learn at much faster speeds than otherwise. And so, talking about developing successful businesses or really positive school systems, we have got to be talking about joy. And the doom and gloom storytelling has not get us anywhere. It's led us to climate anxiety and many people feeling hopeless and leading to inaction. And so, I think by remembering what every child inherently knows and does is having fun outdoors and just being playful, we do, I think it does bring an inherent desire for survival. And when we talk about human survival in our planet, we are talking about regeneration and protection of the planet because they are interconnected, interlocked. And so for me, to be honest, I just like to be a bit like a child. I live, I move around between cities, different places, sometimes really busy locations, sometimes less so, but I like to pay attention even to like the one flower that is growing in the cement, and I will take the time to smell it and just look at it and then just feeling it and appreciating the colors. I think if we just slow down enough, we can even detect the range of colors that a single flower can have, and that is something I just love to do because it just always brings me a little bit more focus and just, yeah, it just brings me joy. I always love to carry a field microscope sometimes when I travel too, and these are very accessible. You can find some for 10 pounds, 15 pounds. You can go a bit more fancy and get some for maybe 16 pounds or $80 that have a camera, and you can do it with your family, with your children, with your friends, and even just being able to magnify colors and textures. Somebody recently even asked me what I thought about biodiversity in England compared to the huge biodiversity we have in the Amazon. And I just made a point to highlight that I love the flowers that, grow here throughout the season. I get to see and experience, and I am so happy whenever I get to see them. So that is how at least I kind of stay curious, and then grounded too.
I love that you mentioned having a field microscope with you. My 4-year-old often, even just to go play in the garden, will pack a little adventurer's hat and a little vest that has all of his gadgets in it, but a field microscope. It's a kid's one, but he's taking that time to really examine and appreciate the world around him. And we lose that at some point, don't we? Somewhere along the line, we go, oh, we'll go for a walk or we'll walk the dog, but we don't stop and really appreciate everything around
Yeah,
us.
absolutely. We're in our heads. I mean, I do this too, of course. I'm like busy in my head, in my schedule. I have to do this, and then I just need to walk the dog because he needs to go out, and I am more busy than this. And I think it's everyone's fault at some point. I definitely felt it more when I was in my PhD. I was really immersed in the work culture, in the moment in the US. And of course, also the pandemic happened when I was still completing my PhD. And it was the first time I couldn't go back home to Peru for so long. I was always having the opportunity to go back. And part of me felt almost like in a hopeless state of, oh, I cannot go back to my family. I cannot go back to the jungle. How am I going to find peace and recalibrate and have that moment, as if I needed to go into the depth of the jungle to find it. And it was me also remembering you don't need to do that. We have the ability to do that with a single bird, a single tree, a single ant that we see out there. And I think having that as a process of me almost remembering that aspect really became a soothing, almost remedy for me during COVID, and seeing it through that angle ever since has really been helpful to kind of like navigate busy life, I guess, in the modern city.
Yes, very much so. I just wanted to remind everybody, if you have any Q&As, that you can drop them in the Q&A function. I certainly have plenty of more questions. And also that we will share Rosa's information at the end if you want to send anything via email. Rosa, I think we already answered it, but someone in the chat did ask if the book is available in Spanish.
Unfortunately, it's not yet, but we are
Okay.
working on it. So hopefully it will be available in Spanish end of the year or early 2026. And I'm hoping, of course, to read it too in Spanish, because I did inherently wrote parts in English, parts in Spanish. And hopefully it will be available in other languages. As of right now, it's available in English. The audio and the Kindle version are accessible worldwide through any place that you get your books from. The hardcover is right now available in England, New Zealand, and Australia in bookshops as well as online. You can already order it for the US, as well as most countries around Europe, India, Saudi Arabia, and so forth through online. And it will be coming within a month or so. So yeah, I look forward to hearing what everybody thinks, and please consider leave a review as well.
I did check. There are multiple outlets online that you can order from. Some smaller, some of the really big ones as well, but they are all on there. So, Rosa, I just had I had a closing question for you, but before we get there, I wanted to very quickly do a rapid fire fun round of quickly answering some questions that have come through us. And quickly fire back what your answers are, questions that have popped up in Q&A. Don't have to think too hard about it. But first one, what is your favorite Amazonian plant or animal?
Achote. And I talk about it in the book. Whenever you see red paint in people's faces, that is what we call the lipstick tree. It is the seeds within a fruit. I use it as lipstick, as sun protector. We use it for food. Yeah, it's the best.
So plant, how about an animal?
Right now, I'm obsessed with tapirs. Of course, I have to say stingless bee. So I would say both stingless bee and tapirs.
If anyone dialing in today has not seen a picture of a baby tapir, especially, definitely take the time to look that up because it will absolutely bring you some joy. And looking at the stack of books behind you, or just in general, what's one book you recommend for people to go home besides your own? What's another book that you'd recommend people to go home and read about?
If people haven't read Braiding Sweetgrass yet, that was definitely a big inspiration for me. It has to open up the conversations in such beautiful and deep ways. So if you haven't read it yet, please go ahead and do so.
I believe there's a Richard Louv book behind you as well. And he's an absolutely fabulous author talking about nature connection and spending time in nature. So I personally would recommend any of his books. What is a rainforest smell that you wish everybody could experience?
Early in the morning and late at night are my favorite because I feel like just flowers emit senses at different times of the day as well. That is how they communicate amongst each other and with animals. And so you can be in the same place and I feel like you'll have different range of flavors that kind of arise. So it's that citrusy with a little bit of bitter and just fresh and crisp scents that come.
That's beautiful. And what about a song or sound that connects you to nature?
Icaros are a beautiful one, and I talk about it in my book whenever I'm talking about ayahuasca, a medicine plant. So Icaro is a traditional singing that Amazonian masters sing while doing the ayahuasca ritual, and they are just so beautiful. It changes, of course, between the different cultures, but and the letters, but the melody is always so soothing that I find it actually really relaxing to hear if I'm having a particularly stressful day or just needing to kind of slow down. You can find some on YouTube actually.
Okay. We are running out of time shortly, and I did want to give a few minutes just to give you sort of an outgoing statement, I think. And I wanted to read my one of my favorite passages from the book, and then ask you to follow up that with a closing question. And it's just one of my favorite, really short passages. Just like the endless colors, textures, and scents we find in the wild, there are indefinite ways to live beautifully. To live beautifully is to reconnect. To reconnect is to love. And to love is to protect our Pachamama. And I just loved that. And talking about loving and protecting, we talked briefly about the concept of good living and being in harmony with nature. What still gives you hope, Rosa? Where do you see signs of hope and joy and maybe a feeling that we are doing something good for the world? You know, we live in a very volatile time. Every single day, someone's saying it's unprecedented times and climate change is real and it's happening and it's scary. But in your research and where you find joy and in your process of good living, where are you still finding hope?
I'll share a little conversation I had with one of the amazing Indigenous leaders that I work with, who we were just chilling in the jungle. I think it was maybe last year. It was at the end of the day. We were tired. We were just having a drink and just social time. And he just looked around and said, I feel so rich. And he is the leader of the community, and so he goes back and forth between his community as well as the city to advocate for their people, as well as sometimes abroad, and yet he feels the richest in the Amazon. This is a man who sees the worst atrocities done to the Amazon, who constantly fights together with us to protect against it. So he is very aware, just as us, of everything that is taking place, but also just finds the most depth level of richness as well as joy, just being there and enjoying time with the trees as well as the rivers, and finding richness in that stillness. I think is something that gives me hope with the local people that we work with, the elderly, the youth, the women. They find themselves feeling so rich by having nature alive. And if we can adopt that, if they can maintain that, then I think we have hope to do better. And if we can share those lessons with more people that can find joy, they will be more willing to protect it and to take positive action and decisions for our planet.
So then, what would you ask of the people who've dialed in tonight? What is your call to action for us? What do we do going forward? We read your book, we share it with our friends, we embrace everything that's in it. What else can we do?
I would say take time to slow down and appreciate what you have around. It's easy to think, oh, to explore biodiversity, I need to go to the depths of the corner, but I won't be able to. I don't have the time or the resources or the ability, or I'm scared or whatever it is. But really, all of that, that richness that we're talking about, it's on everyone's reach by going outside. And whether it is that you have a backyard or a garden nearby, or you need to walk a bit farther to find a tree, just take time to slow down and just look closer for more than a minute and really pay attention with all your being without focusing on anything else. I think if we slow down, then you can start at least wondering what more could we do. And perhaps that means you start to support a local group that helps with recycling or cleaning, or perhaps you share more information that is beneficial to others to live a more green life, or perhaps you can support different groups that are doing so, or perhaps you take a decision within your company that leads to more sustainable practices. That is how step by step we make a better planet.
Great. Thank you so much. Ria, you can pop up any of the slides. We wanted to share with everybody a few events that we have coming up, in addition to the QR code to buy Rosa's book. It did just come out in May, so you will certainly be amongst some of the first people to read it if you decide to share it with a book club, your community. Certainly let us know, let Rosa know. It is a really fabulous read. Certainly something fun to read on a beach holiday or something like that this summer. Share it. I actually found myself reading parts of it to my kids during breakfast. I just thought it was a really, really wonderful book to read. So QR code is there. We also wanted to share with you that Tree Sisters will be having a book club in September. You can sign up through Eventbrite through our website. And we will be discussing Rosa's book, and we will be sharing everything we loved about it. If you'd like to join us, please sign up. It is again on our website through Eventbrite. My colleague Ria has shared the link in the chat. Again, we will be discussing the book we discussed tonight, Rosa's book, The Spirit of the Rainforest. And if it's something that you would like to share with other book club communities, let us know. Share us everything that you've discussed there as well. Tree Sisters, for the first time this year, will also be participating in London Climate Action Week. It is the world's second largest climate movement. It is a week of events. There are over 700 events this year, and we will be having a panel discussion with Rosa, with our colleagues Mumta Ito and Bronte Ansell. And we will be discussing the rights of nature. Again, talking about how we can give legal protection to the nature around us, to the world around us, talking about some examples of that already taking place. And for those of you who might already know Bronte, she's a member of the Tree Sisters board, but she is also a really pioneering woman who has worked on putting nature on the board, so part of a voting board member, which is super, super exciting. So Rosa will be joining us for that as well. We're really excited about that. We will also be offering a mindful meditation out to our networks as part of that to help anyone who is participating in Climate Week discussions who might want to find a tool to help them manage climate anxiety or some of maybe the more difficult conversations they might be having that week. So we have a lot going on. We're really excited. Thank you everybody for joining us tonight. There is also a QR code or excuse me, there's a link to the donation page. Tree Sisters is a charity. We operate off of donations from some of our business partners, but also people like yourselves. So certainly if you find a moment to donate a little bit, it will help support our work in nature connection and restoration as well. The events for Climate Action Week are also on the chat, so please feel free to sign up for that as well. We hope everybody enjoyed it. There will be a feedback form coming your way if you've signed up, and the recording you will receive via email. Let us know any feedback, what you'd like to see on our next webinar, anything you'd like to know. Certainly, we would love to see your name and your feedback pop up. Lots of thank yous from everyone in the audience tonight. Rosa, thank you so much. I absolutely loved this, and I have to say I'm a bit of a fangirl tonight with you. So thank you so much for spending this time with us. Absolutely loved it, and thank you for everybody who has tuned in. We would not be here without all of you supporting Tree Sisters and our wonderful scientists like Rosa. Thank you
Thank you
very
so
much.
much. Thank you so much, Ashley and True Sisters, for hosting me. Thank you so much, everyone, for the beautiful comments. See you soon.
Thank you.